So yeah, what I want to do in this part, second part, is kind of experiment, talk through a version of a structural analysis this time, and I want to pick just because probably it's a story that I know and you know, right? A myth of European society, but it's one that's actually a children's story, fable, and Levi-Strauss raises legitimate questions about how you can't really do it to your own or European. Oh, anyway, we're leaving out a lot of the much argued over assumptions, right? In how to prepare a structural analysis. So gathering the ethnographic materials, we're kind of assuming them, that we have all the context, and we probably don't. And the various myths of the story are completely distorted by the fact that Disney's got hold of this one, but we're going to look at Snow White, all right? You know the story of Snow White, the age-old problem of jealousy and the relationship of work to success and happiness. Why do I think it's that? Because I think when Snow White strays from her work, she gets poisoned, although she also becomes a princess. There are really interesting issues about representation in this story as well. The forest, the darkness of the forest, the light and the mirror of the castle, the glass coffin that she's dead, and the resolve with it's not exactly a kiss of the prince, although he does get to kiss her, but also a bump in the road. Anyway, so try and use Levi-Strauss's style of thinking about myth to remind you by looking at the armature of the myths, the oppositions, the relationships, and to map them onto some kind of pattern structure, recognizing that this is supposed to be the myth itself or the story itself thinking through and moving through some resolution or some action that will solve a problem. And we work out along the way what the problems are or what the rules are that the dilemma is that's explained or something. So to remind ourselves of the story, it's hard to separate telling the story from now thinking about how a structuralist might examine it. But let's say, right, so there's the mother of Snow White who jabs her finger while she's sewing. Some drops of blood fall onto the Snow White, pure white, and she wishes she could have a daughter with blood red lips and black hair and white skin. And 9 months later, magically, her daughter is born, but the mother dies in childbirth. Of course, it's happened in so many stories, right? Cinderella as well. The father remarries, and the second wife is, well, in this one, she's a witch. She's not just the mother of the ugly stepsisters. She's a witch. And she has a magic mirror. And she's very jealous or very proud of how her magic's made her the most beautiful in the land. And she keeps on saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me who's the fairest of them all. Wanting to, look like, and which is all well and good until Snow White becomes a 16-year-old. And the mirror has to say, when the queen, witch, second wife, says mirror, mirror on the wall, the mirror has to say, yeah, I'm sorry, don't break me, don't shoot the messenger, but there is this one other, and it's Snow White. And so the mother, the second wife, sorry, the mother-in-law, is jealous of this beautiful princess, so she sets out to have her killed. So she's to be killed by a hunter. The hunter is ordered to take her on a journey out into the forest and kill her and bring back her heart, because that's what wicked stepmothers do, ask for the heart to prove that she's been killed. But the hunter can't do it. The hunter takes on the job for starters, but then he can't fulfill the job. And he instead kills a pig and brings back the heart and shows the wicked queen this. And Snow White runs into the forest. Run away, the hunter says. You're not safe here anymore. You'll have to go. And she joins up with the dwarves. She moves into she finds the dwarves' house, and basically breaks into the house. She's a princess. That's how they behave. And she cleans up their hut. She does the housework before they come home. Now, this is the problem that the myth is dealing with, is the problem of aging, women getting older, jealousy, but maybe also the relationship of work to success, because Snow White's obviously good. And we see that because the first thing she actually does, really, besides being beautiful, is unasked for, she cleans up the house of the 7 dwarfs. Like, well, it's a little bit invasive and a bit weird, but anyway, she does their housework. She works for them, and she stays away. But the witch has asked the mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest? And the mirror's had to say, well, no, she lives. Snow White lives. So dressed up as a haggard old saleswoman, the wicked queen in disguise, tries to entice Snow White out of the house. The dwarves have said, never leave the house. The forest isn't safe. When we're off working in the mines, hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off to work we go, in the Disney movie version. When we're at work in the mines, it's not safe if you leave the house. Don't leave the house under any conditions. And twice the wicked queen tries to entice her out of the house, but fails. Finally, she comes and tries to sell her some apples that are poisoned apple. And this time the dwarves can't save her from that, and she's unconscious. Well, for all intents and purposes, she's dead. And the dwarfs are unhappy. Tragic event has fallen, and they make her a glass coffin and place her in, because they love her and they worship her. And but none of them get to have a relationship with her. Anyway, she's a princess. We don't go there. So, like, in terms of planning things on a structure, we've got in the castle, the evil queen, the wicked witch queen, has a mirror that can see everywhere and tells the truth. You're not the fairest in the land. There's one other. But then in the dwarf's hut, we have another glass reflecting surface, or a surface you can see through. The mirror you can kind of see through to anywhere. And this mirror you can see through, and you can see that Snow White is dead. But that's not the truth. She's only unconscious. The dwarfs don't know that. So there's alive and truth. The mirror also thinks that now Snow White's dead and says, you're the loveliest of all, to the wicked queen. The wicked queen's happy. But this story is not resolved until along comes a powerful, fair prince. All right, and he finds out about Snow White's story from the dwarfs, and they sadly agree with him that she'll be taken back to the castle and properly buried, because she's a princess, right? She can't just stay in the glass coffin forever. On the way back to the castle, though, the carriage he is using to carry her hits a bump in the road, right? So this pathway is interrupted, another structural element, and the jolt dislodges the poison apple that was stuck in her throat, and she wakes up and falls in love with the prince, kisses him, and he asks her to marry him, and she accepts, right? The wicked queen is still jealous, but this super powerful grown prince is wise to her tricks and orders her to dance in a pair of red hot slippers, and they can't stop dancing, and she dances herself to death. basically. That's not in every version. They didn't put that in the Disney version. That's a shame. But yeah, of course, there are many variations and similarities with other stories. Like we can think of Sleeping Beauty. She gets wakened by a kiss, but she's not in a glass coffin. She's in a castle surrounded by thorns, but it's still a prince that comes and resolves her. But in a way, we're thinking through the problems of jealousy and work, of course, because it's only when she stops doing housework does Snow White get into trouble. And it's the heroic and dedicated little workers, the little workers, the dwarves who are, right in all of this, except for the magic prince who's on the side of right as well. But we don't question that in the myth. There's some things that myths don't deal with, which is interesting too. So we can see how, we go back to my little drawing, we can see how I can make a kind of architecture of Snow White, the story. The evil queen, Snow White, old, young, or getting older, but becoming beautiful, right? The mirror that tells the truth, it's on the wall, the glass cabinet, right? The hunter is sort of in between somehow because he does the bidding of the wicked witch, but he can't kill her. And so he takes an animal in her place, but he's found out. The mirror can't be deceived by that, the heart in the box. But the poison apple, well, is nature and culture, nature and animal a factor? I don't know. You can think of all the different oppositions that Levi-Strauss might bring into this, right? Is housework like mine work? Is the food of the forest that Snow White cooks for the dwarfs different to the poisoned apple? So she eats the apple in the forest and it kills her, but she's not dead. It makes her unconscious. It sticks in her throat. And then, so she's traveled to the forest to die, but interrupted by the hunter. And now the prince, who's like the hunter, sort of in between, is carrying her back from the forest to the castle. And she's interrupted by going over a bump. And that dislodges the apple and everything is resolved. So a trick gets her killed, and the hunter had tried to trick the queen but hadn't. But the real trick was the poison apple, but that was interrupted by, I suppose, without the hunter having turned, none of this would have been possible. So that the trip on the road back, so the carriage gets jolted, is structurally similar to the hunter jolting the plans of the evil queen. I don't know. So you can see at least how Levi-Strauss's thinking, that style of thinking, might be applied to something like Snow White or Cinderella or so many of those stories, right? Or you could try it with a story like Penguin, the story of an immortal who stands for the desire for freedom in the time of the Hun Kings. A woman goes out, sees big footprints, gets pregnant, gives birth to a child named Gyong, right? Invaders from China come. The king needs heroes and comes through the village, and the child asks his mother for a steel sword, a horse, saddle, and a whip. This is basically also a Disney film, isn't it? Mulan copied this sort of story. I mean, it's a myth cycle. Anyway, Gyong will fight the enemy, and after he decides to fight for freedom, the village gets food, he grows strong, and I'm not sure of all the details. I remember in the story the whip's broken, and afterwards he returns to the sky. But we can think about structural analysis for that. Well, you can think about it. I don't know enough of the context, but I imagine there are similar stories in different parts of Vietnam and maybe all across Asia. Who knows, since Mulan is is similar to that, and so many others. Now, the critique of Levi-Strauss's style of doing this research is pretty extensive, of course. So as views of which part of the book people will focus on, whether it's the ecological or the structural stuff has been criticized more. I mean, in many ways, Derrida's essay is exactly that, a critique of Levi-Strauss having projected the contents of his mind onto the myths. But Levi-Strauss says the myths are doing this work. They are working through the contradictions. They kind of collectively think. They're the science of the people that tell the myths, thinking through their problems about food and where does food come from, or how does cooking happen, or where do table manners, why do you eat certain things, and also like the second volume of Mythology is called From Honey to Ashes, and it's about these interesting factors in the stories where honey is like, it's a raw food, but it's cooked by nature in a way. It's super sweet and it's difficult to get. You have to use culture smoke to get to the beehive, to get the honey out without being bitten. And then ashes, which you get after cooking something too much, are overcooked food. And what are the structural elements in the spectrum of different kind of metaphors or allegories that can tell us about our lives involved there? And Levi-Strauss finds a lot of these myths thinking through, he says the myths are thinking through him. Other people are saying, well, no, you're projecting onto the myths and so on. Now, Maurice Godelier has written a big, fat 535-page book on Levi-Strauss. And he's interesting, very interesting as a student of Levi-Strauss, but also a critic. And he appreciates, of course, the mythological world. It's focused on imaginary time. It's the remote past where gods and humans or animals, they all live together. They communicate with each other and they change into each other, one another, some animals. And right, Jaguar, who stole fire, was in human form, but when humans took fire from Jaguar turned into a creature that had to kill raw food, couldn't cook anymore in some versions. But at some point this time closed and people stopped being animals. So this is related to totemism and so on. But this mythical time is also the time of the origins of things, right? So it's endless time, the origin of the sun, of the moon, of the stars, and of the things that we take for granted forever, having been around. Cooking, hunting, tobacco, rivers, salmon, sex, death, water, fire, writing, anything can be explained by telling a story in myths. Today we do this with films. Really, like we're trying to. Like, the most obvious example, I think, is people are worried about ecology and the environment and pollution on this planet. So we keep on making sci-fi movies about asteroids coming and hitting Earth, right? And Bruce Willis has to go and save us from the asteroid. But really, that's not about space. The problem is not coming from outside. The problem is us here polluting this planet. And it's the only one we got, until China colonizes Mars. If that's... Anyway, by the by, Godelier's critique of this, though, is, right, he appreciates that there is such immense amount of work and that Levi-Strauss has gone through all the techniques and ecological background and metallurgical information and gathered so much work and diagrams and so on. It's an exceptional achievement from every point of view. He just doesn't believe it, all right? And what the Indians do here when they hear their myths is not just the story being told, it explains why women have periods or why the moon has spots, right? What they're listening to is the discourse of the myths. What they hear through the images, ideas, the symbolic figures underpinning the myths is the latent discourse of the myth that tells the story of where things come and the values of them, right? So if we projected that onto Snow White, don't be jealous. That makes you a witch. Be like Snow White. Work for whoever you find. Be a good worker. Don't be deceived by the person who comes selling shiny apples. Just do your work and you'll end up a princess again, right? That it tells little moral stories, right? And well, that's where the problem for Gedalia arises. Levi Strauss states that these stories are apparently without rhyme or reason. There's no reason for Snow White to have started working in the dwarf's house. Why did she do that? You could have said, I'm a princess. I'm your princess. Look after me. You know, she could have. But the Indians do receive them as truths. But Gedalia has a problem with this formula since it ignores the sacred and divine order, and it ignores Marxism, basically. Even though Levi Strauss says that he's a Marxist, and we can see even, you know, he has the right books on his shelves. This is the Ethnological collection, actually. I've got another picture of his library where you can see that he's got Marx too in the French edition. But for Gedalia, Levi Strauss, his work should be respected, right? And if he thinks that myths are giving answers to the problems raised and adjusting through the story values, the question is who produces this content? Now, in each individual case, the story is alienated, is told of parent gods, and from each angle, but it's always meant as allegorical by the teller to the listeners, right? Now, a lot is going on in Levi Strauss's brain, right? And he's genius, and for many years, and he's well rewarded and got prizes and the gift from the present. His formulas are rich, superb, and provocative, but they make no sense, according to Gedalia. The myths are thought expressed in different languages, sure, but the myths don't think. They're not thinking subjects. They can't operate in men's minds nor upon themselves. Humans have to tell the stories, right? So it's physicists might say waves and particles make up light are operating in his mind, but they're not. They're in reality, right? And then we tell stories about that reality. Here, the photograph is Levi Strauss meeting with the president of France. And what I like about this photograph is it looks like Levi Strauss is it's like president of France is meeting, or the prime minister, Sarkozy, is meeting Levi Strauss, not the other way around. Levi Strauss hasn't been invited into the prime minister's office. The prime minister has been invited into Levi Strauss. But Gedalia is critical of this because he says, you know, the other thing that's missing here is the relations of production, Marx's relations of production. I mean, who tells these stories? What's missing is the strategic component of the economic infrastructure of a society, the relations of production, the social relations that determine the rights of groups or individuals that make up a society that's controlled by storytelling, telling about exploits or exploiting stories for their benefit. And the elements of what are the relations of production that are then related in myth and narrative that privileges in Snow White's story. Some people are destined to work in mines because they're little, and some people are unquestionably good princes. They just happen to be magic and get the girl. Like that economic relationship, which we have plenty of ethnographic material about, and you know, it gets abolished, mostly kingship. is abolished in Europe, isn't a factor for Levi-Strauss. So his allegiance to Marxism gets to be quizzed by Godelier, and for that reason, great stuff. Although he obviously respects the man, since he's also got that fantastic photograph of him on the cover, which, you know, is the same cover as the one on the where's it gone? The most recent edition of Tris Tropiques, that's focusing on Levi-Strauss, because now he died at 101 years of age 3-4 years ago. Actually, time's passing weirdly for me. I don't remember when he died. Let me just check. Anyone faster at typing, please also do. 2009, really? Oh my God. 12 years, that can't have been 12 years ago. I feel like he just died a couple of years ago. Anyway, he's been dead 12 years. But people don't buy the structuralist story anymore, but they certainly love his mind, his analysis. There is something in the process of analyzing the stories. It just leaves out some other parts of the story that you want to bring in, like the modes of production and how these stories work as ideology. Because that's what the Marxist critique would introduce. It would say, and these stories are ideology. See how the ideology works in the hands of some people with power, the storytellers. Even though we also greatly appreciate Levi-Strauss's commitment to the people themselves, right? To what Levi-Strauss did with this book. It does start the structuralist analysis, but it also is a still powerful plea to take seriously the effect of capitalism on other thought, other possible ways of being human in the world, and how these are being destroyed. It's a cry about that, and for that, the man deserved the prizes and the respect he got for all the different silly other things he said, and his exoticism, and nevertheless, to be able to have at least tried to comprehend and then written critiques of racism for the United Nations, and to have tried to get France to be a less imperial power. Got to respect him for that. I mean, he wasn't exactly saying off with their heads, but yeah. Now Derrida's thing about writing, I'm going to get back to that a bit. Derrida's focus on writing had been really much about how important writing was for the production of knowledge, and whether or not writing was central to knowledge as such. Without writing, could we communicate lessons learnt to another generation? And in a way, he's saying a wider sense of writing can do the work of writing without there actually being writing in our European sense, right? That a system of mythology, of names, of language is a way of inscribing the world. But it raises some really fun questions, like where does writing come from? What's the origin of it? Before speech, after speech? So yeah, now we have a lot of comments. So I'm going to look at just some on this. Not all the questions, but the ones that are interesting for me right now, I guess, are the origin of writing. Does it come before speech or after speech? That's a big question for Derrida. So let's see if anyone's got any answers to that. So gang. The written word is the instrument of power and oppression. Could be. Except Derrida is saying that just meaning. It doesn't have to be the written word, but absolutely it is. And you know, Benjamin had also said that every document of civilization, every piece of writing is also a document of barbarism, because the winners usually write the history. That means somebody has lost, you know. Even the greatest things in writing, I don't know, the Declaration of Independence or the UN Human Rights Charter, they're only on the back of the war of the United Nations was built on the back of the war of World War II. American independence was colonialism. Without occupation of the Americas, the extermination of the persecution of the Native Americans, no independence movement, for no declaration of independence. Everyone has the right to blah blah blah. Yeah. So anyone has any comment, please say. I think the origin of the written word predates speech. That's unto. Cool. Say more, maybe. Yeah, good writing is writing in our own right. We can refer to the material but not have a copy of it. It's well written. Yeah, cool. You know, there's a distinction that's important. I was thinking of here, the difference between good handwriting and good writing as in beautiful expression. Think of an author like Win Nok Tu. Or in fact, the difference between Levi Strauss's Tris Tropiques, and I don't know how the translation will go, but it's a beautiful writing style, and his less elegant stuff in totemism when he does proper ethnography, although even that's written quite well. Writing was born after speech. Antu. Let me translate here. Oh, not working. Okay. Good. According to the document, the origin of writing is wonderfully between the invention of writing and the advent of modern science. The Western world existed for about 5,000 years, during which a total of its knowledge, instead of increasing and decreasing rather than steady increase, in my opinion, speech precedes writing. At least that's what Levi Strauss tells us. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's an answer to this one, right? But I imagine, and this is maybe romantic and ethnocentric as well. I imagine the first times that there were writing and speech appear together in a way. You think of ancient forebears hunting or gathering, right? That's to survive. We are hunter-gatherers. Before farming, before any of settlement, before the Sumerians, right? And we're tracking down a wild boar in the forest or something, wanting to kill it to eat it. Now you can't, you've got to surround the thing. And I see it, it's over there behind that tree, but I can't shout to tell my fellow wild man, Grunk or whatever his name is, over there. I make a sign saying, look at that. The first sign is the beginning of, before that we're hungry, rubbed your stomach. Get the book. The first signs, the necessity of getting food was the reason for making the first sign. And you had to go into the forest to get food, so you mark the way so you can find your way back. Or if you're hunting, or if you're gathering fruit or something, right? There might be some berries that last week you ate and they made your stomach feel sick. So you have to tell your friend not to eat those berries. I don't know, you make some kind of gesture or sign to explain that which was pain. And from then you start to share the meaning of your signs. Like everyone understanding that rubbing your belly means hunger, or that this means being sick. Right? And from that, the sharing of the arbitrary nature of the sign is how both language and marking, by making signs, marking the trees on the way home, leaving a trail. Leaving a trail is the process of making language and writing. Writing is the trail, right? So it doesn't have to be knowledge for the next generation. It could be knowledge for you just to get home that day. But you have to mark it in the world in some way. It's not putting it on a map, but it's putting it in the environment. I don't know. Is that the originally seen? Is that like or is this just too abstract and Freudian? And anyway, we can't check it. We couldn't even do experiments to, like, there can't be people without language. The idea of the Mowgli brought up by wolves, right, doesn't even allow us to have that experiment, because of course Mowgli, both fiction, and if the child is brought up by wolves, that child learns signification anyway. Not just instinct, is it? Is it? I'm not sure. Okay, we're going on. Van. I think my writing style is similar to that of Chief Namaquara. Mine too. But you know how impressive is Vietnamese writing, okay? Look at what they're making my daughter do. She's 4, 5, and her assignment is to over and over write these letters out. Yeah, we get onto the right tab. You all probably did these exercises, right? You've got the letter O, and you've got to write it out dozens and dozens of times until you get it really neat and good, which she hasn't yet. Although by the end, she got it pretty good. My writing is awful. I wouldn't even make it to dwarf in Nambikwara society, let alone, that's prejudice, isn't it? Shouldn't say that. So I totally agree, Van, very funny and true. But it's amazing that some cultures still, some of our civilizations, some cultures really value writing. Kids in England today can't write for nuts. All they can do is text. They have no handwriting skill. It's become obsolete. It's a shame because, yeah, I feel very embarrassed though going into the bank, trying to fill out a form and writing as if like either I was a child or a doctor. Doctors don't have to write. And they're the one people that are exempt from writing anything neat. Okay, Quinn. Politics uses more formal, careful, legal words. Yeah. Writing predates Bronze Age, 4th millennium BC, maybe. I don't know, actually. I mean, I think a lot of things are missing from our knowledge. For example, right, we think of the front cover of Grammatology, right? That picture of I think Horus, Osiris, Horus, the god with the crow's head. Is that Horus? I don't know. Might as well check that as well. Horus. Yeah, no, it's not Horus. Horus is a little bit different. Does anyone know which god that one is? See, this is Horus. Horus has got a smaller beak. All right, the large-beaked Egyptian god, Thoth. Thoth. This one. Oh, Antinos, the gay god. What? The internet is funny, right? Okay. I think we got Thoth. That's this one. But this one, Antinius, the gay god, I do want to know. Okay. Antinius. Okay, they call him Thoth as well. All right. Yeah, this is the one. God Thoth. That's the same picture, right? It's exactly that same one as in the cover of the book. Anyway, what I was wondering about is whether in all these scrolls, we've got him writing again there, we actually get anything other than glories to the pharaoh, the god king. Do we get like normal knowledge, like instructions on how to build things, like how to build pyramids? I don't know if they exist. Maybe they were written on papyrus and that's all died out. Or maybe it was secret knowledge that only the specialists hung on to. But as far as I don't know this material, and I want to find out whether or not how to. Not that I want to build pyramids, but did they leave a set of instructions or a maintenance guide for? Anyway, by the by, what is writing used for? What knowledge? So this is a stylized version of that image of Thoth. Thoth, the millions of ibises were mummified. But where did Egypt get them? Well, I imagine by the river. Who knows? Interesting. And the overlap here with mythology, that this is in a period where humans still had some affinities with their totem animals. I'd be interested to know a lot more than I do about this side of things. Whether or not structuralists, I'm sure there are structuralists that have studied ancient Egypt in relation to Levi-Strauss's schema. Nobody would do that today. It's so out of date. It belongs to a period that really lost its coherence, its fame as a project in the 70s already. Late 70s, early 80s. After that, when I was an undergraduate, Levi-Strauss was taught seriously, and in between then and when I started teaching anthropology, it no longer was. I always included a little bit. I always have and still find it absolutely fascinating and love to read Levi-Strauss. But time moved on. But yeah, ancient Egypt would be something to explore. Levi-Strauss kind of says there's things that aren't suitable for structural analysis. And I guess the work needed to bring back the mode of production into structural analysis in the context of power, the question of power, Foucault's set of questions of power, is ripe, and given that there seems to be nothing new but recycling of old ideas, maybe the time to reinvent structuralism will come. No reason except from the complaint that there's nothing new nowadays. That all we've got is nostalgia for the days when there were exciting ideas, according to Mark Fisher, anyway. But maybe that's not the whole story. Well, folks, I think that's it for today. I want to go back to talk a little bit, just briefly, about next week. Okay, so I will read the rest of these. And so please do make sure you've included your bit. Because, yeah, there's a lot now. That's good. That's also the attendance. But for next week, we're looking at John Gledhill's work. And John Gledhill is, well, he was professor of politics at Manchester University. He came in and took over my course and made it into what became this book, Power and Its Disguises. So it was nice to hand that over to him. He was really a lot of support for me as well subsequently. So I'm happy to pass it on, in a sense, by advocating for his book, Power and Its Disguises, a great book now, if 20 years old. Because it says so much about colonialism and importantly, puts anthropology in that context. And so that's what we'll be reading, although we're looking at the writing culture debate as well in that context. So it's how anthropology took on this question of writing that Derrida kind of brings up. I mean, not directly from Derrida, but from within anthropology. But certainly reading Derrida helped some anthropologists think about how their own practice as writers worked, including Clifford Geertz was big in this, but some others as well who are really interesting. So make sure you do this reading, because again, the questions will be about the reading. It's page 67 to 90 of Gledhill. And if you click on the name Gledhill, it brings you to Power and Its Disguises. And I've excerpted Chapter 4, The Political Anthropology of Colonialism, a Study of Domination and Resistance. Now, anthropologists say can over-egg the story of resistance sometimes, but it's also important to include it because sometimes they do not. All right, so enjoy your reading of John Gledhill. He's retired now from Manchester, but I think he's still editing the journal Critique of Anthropology, which is a good one, and still writing books, I believe. First published 1994. The second edition, the update, was the one he did in 2000. So it's even older than that. But here he completely rewrote it. So that's why the second edition is worth getting. Not sure if there might have been even a third. Been enough time, isn't there? It works as a kind of textbook, but I don't know if he's continued, but one can only hope. Okay. Yeah, folks, that's it for today, I think. Thank you very much for your attendance. Keep the questions coming and answers coming to questions on those that I put up in the announcements page, those you put onto email to me, or as some people have been sending me Facebook messages. Thank you for those. More would be great. Actually, the more I hear from you, the better I can tailor things to, communicate back. And so email or question or add things to the e-learning page and announcements. Thank you very much and see you. Okay. Oh, I got to stop the recording, don't I?